we will now move on to the papers. The sessions with papers is going to begin with a paper from a wonderful young and dynamic professor of psychology working at IIT Mumbai. He is an inspiration to even seniors like me. He is actually pioneering in uh, contemporarily methodological research into the psychological topics within our scriptures. Uh, Even we take guidance from him in such aspects, and he applies contemporary psychological methods to study the psychological issues in psychological topics from our scriptures. Professor Ashish Pandey is going to talk today on two case studies from the Indian psychological studies. Professor Ashish Pandey, over to you.
Dhanyavad, Professor Nagaraj ji, for very, very kind words. I'm a student of many of the presenters here and many of the probably the audience here. So it is just a humbling experience. Whatever I have, whatever I'm going to share is actually the teachings of the teachers like Professor Bhavuk and Professor Rajan Gupta, and Raghuji, and so many others. So thanks very much for giving me opportunity for sharing some of the work of late I have been engaged in. Let me start with the presentation. The title of the work is Can Yoga-based practices, can yoga be the foundation of organizational and social transformation? I'm a student of organization development or human resource development. That is like the first field of mine where I kind of educated and got my degree and did my research at MDI Gurgaon. So, and then, so for a few years, I was working in this field of organization development, organization climate, etc. And then moved towards the research in mindfulness and yoga last few years. When we look at the research in yoga and yoga-based practices, we find a lot of work at the individual level. So whether it is a physiological manifestations or psychological manifestations of yoga. So psychological impact of yoga are still scarce. We have a lot to know. There are a lot of interesting unanswered fundamental questions waiting to be discovered and waiting to be examined. But still there is some work. And certainly there's a lot of work at the physiological impact because that is most evident, and the existing paradigm of science is the predominant paradigm is analytical, positivist, and all field actually want to look, in order to look like science, they want to adopt analytical research approaches, and which is very good, and it has actually really helped in making the world convince about the potential of yoga. So we have thousands of studies on the physiological impact. Dr. Shirley Tellis of India, Dr. Virambali, and the researchers in the S. Vyasa and Nimhans, they have done really fantastic work in establishing the different aspect of physiological manifestations, positive manifestations with the yoga-based intervention. My background is being more in organization development and HRD. And there's also a need to look at yoga in the context of organization, in the context of society. So that is the genesis of this research project about social and organizational transformation. If we look at the, so in the two case studies, first I will talk about the social organizational transformation, and then I will talk about the social transformation. Organizational transformation, we did a case study in a port in Dhamra, and we did a field work, extensive field work. Our PhD scholar, Shri Raju Aditya Agrawal ji also that has become eventually his PhD work as well. So we looked at how one organization which faced a major crisis, it was a relational crisis, it was a crisis of the industrial relations, actually bounced back, and the healing process. So they actually turned from a very negative climate to much more positive climate, much more cooperation in the organization climate. So that's what we observed in our field work. And when we looked at the organizational literature, we found a concept called organizational healing, and we could connect that what was happening in this sport was the process of organization healing. So organization healing is a process of repairing and restoring the social relationships of the organization after any crisis. This was the port acquired by a corporate, and then some of the people whose land had to be given up, government acquired, and this it was the land of many farmers were acquired in the process of establishing the economic zone. So there was a sense of hurt, and many of them also became they had to become employee in that organization or became small time contractor in that organization. So there was a sense of angst and hurt, which was a very important factor in creating that unrest. And there must be many other factors. So I'm not going to discuss all those, but what actually happened was a crisis resulting from the disruption in the relational framework. And the healing process was about repairing and restoring the social relationship. Healing aims to restore the organizational function and supporting the colleagues, restoring the organizational process. So that's what actually happened in the healing process. Healing involves both resilience as well as growth. So we have to live through, and then also growth is the sign of healing process. For organizational healing, Pauli's work is there, and Pauli and the colleague identify 4 factors: empathy, interventions, collective effort or organizational involvement, and leadership. All 4 factors are equally important in organizational healing. Because empathy, because that's a cement, that's a very basis. Empathy has to be there in the interactions, in the culture. Then only healing can take place. Collective effort means healing cannot be done just by fixing one aspect of organization. So if we look at a 2x2 matrix of Cain Wilber, where he talks about subjective, objective, collective, and individual, organizations can be looked at from that angle. And then in organization, we see individual subjective experiences like values, beliefs, attitude. There are some individual objective manifestations at behavioral level. Then there are collective systems which are verifiable, which are objective. Organizational structure is a verifiable thing. ERP you implement is a verifiable thing. The technology, the production setup, the sitting arrangement, all those are the collective objective aspect of organization. And then there are collective cultural aspects, which are shared values, beliefs, and norms. Healing requires intervention at all levels. Actually, OD itself requires intervention at all levels. So the real key thing about the successful organization development, OD intervention, is to pick up the appropriate interventions at one quadrant and carefully examining how even an intervention at the individual subjective level can have manifestations at individual objective level, and how we can use that, and or what is needed at the collective structural level or collective cultural level. So any intervention has to be properly understood in the context of all these aspects of organization, and healing is also not an exception to that. We require organization-wide intervention for healing, and of course the leadership is has to be supportive. Leaders have to have, other than empathy, need to have a proactive, nurturing, creative ability to see what is needed in that moment. So our focus when we look at yoga is on the intervention aspect of it. All three are important. I am not proposing that yoga itself is sufficient. All three are important. Empathy is important, collective effort is important, supportive leadership is important. What yoga can immensely contribute is identifying the appropriate interventions. If we look at most of the psychological interventions, whether starting from the psychotherapy to psychodrama to gestalt therapy to positive psychological interventions, most of these interventions focus at the Manomaya Kosh and Vijnanamaya Kosh. Manomaya Kosh, which is about the sheath of emotions, and Vijnanamaya Kosh, which is the layer of intellect, raciocination. In Manomaya Kosh, we experience the feelings, we have these feelings, and Vijnanamaya Kosh can be aligned, can be nurtured with the right purpose, metacognitive, right metacognition, सम्यक ज्ञान जिसको भगवान बुद्ध कहते थे, that is the essence, that is the hallmark, that is the kind of manifestation at the Vijnanamaya Kosh which can govern life. Most of the interventions are at the Manomaya Kosh and few are there in the Vijnanamaya Kosh. In the modern OD interventions, psychological interventions, including positive psychological interventions. What is totally missing, almost totally missing, is the Pranamaya Kosh related interventions, which can enhance your vitality, which can enhance the energy, because the quality and the intensity of the energy you have determines your attitude and the impulses and your decision making, your problem solving abilities, or including metacognition. So the ability for the metacognition also is subjected to my sense of vitality, my experience of vitality. If I'm feeling weak, feeble, unenergized, negative, filled with negative energy, I will not be able to see through the things, and I will not be able to make harmony based positive decisions. So Pranamaya Kosh interventions are almost missing in the psychology. Most of the so-called conventional psychology literature. And there is some talk at the physical level, body-mind related, some interventions are now identified at the body level. So, but yoga is one intervention which operates, which works at all 5 levels. So that's why we can see that yoga is a candidate. Yoga can be a comprehensive OD interventions. And if it is a comprehensive OD intervention, if it works at the individual, at all layers of individual, we have no reason to disbelieve that it will have impact at all levels of organization. So that's what was happened. This case is about that. There are a lot of models which emerged from this case analysis. Paper is under review, and some part of it was adjudged as the most promising thesis award by MSR Division of Academy of Management meeting last year. What we find that yoga-based intervention leads to reduced turbulence of mind, calmness, and that increases concentration, and that also increases recall. So whatever the right things being taught, people are able to retain those. The positive learnings, positive teachings are retained when there is a yoga there to support that intervention, because dharana badh jati hai, and when the dharana increases, dharana gets strengthened, we are able to retain the right thoughts for the longer time. And of course, the niyam and yam are the moderating and very important factors in that. And that's what we found, that it increased the work output, it increased the work quality, and it increased the quality standard for self and team. And that resulted into the impact at the group and organizational work. Those who are in the field of management, and those who are have familiarity to the training and development, HRD and the OD kind of field, they must be aware that in most of the organization, actually it is difficult to get the best people of yours, a large number of people of yours coming out of their work settings to receive training and to receive the developmental input. Many times even supervisors don't release them. But what we found in this at this site was that supervisors, and I personally talked to at least 60, 70 people, and about 15-20 supervisors also were amongst them, who were like leading a small team of 3 to 4 people to the large team of 50 to 60 people. Everybody said that I want my people to go through this program, and this program was designed especially by Art of Living Foundation, and this was called the Harmony program because harmony was needed in that organization. And all the supervisors were hoping that all their team members will go through this program. And when we looked at the output before and after, there was a clear kind of improvement. There was a clear improvement at the workplace relationship. There was also a clear improvement at the relationship in the families. So a lot of other problems like addiction related problems or alcoholism, those things also were subsided. These were systematically documented in that case. So this is a real case of organization transformation. I'm calling it real case because organization is considered of people. If people are not healed, organizations cannot be healed. And here in this case, we could see people went through the healing process at the individual level as well, at the personal level as well. And there was a healing at workplace as well. So the relationship became much positive. There was much lesser tendency to find out faults in others. Otherwise, because of this political dynamics, people don't point out each other's mistake and they wait for others' mistake to blow out of proportion so that they can get some political mileage out of that. Those things were significantly reduced and those things were reported. So this is one story of the organization transformation. Another case is about social transformation, and the social transformation is this case is based on the experience of 10 villages in the Marathwada region. Few years ago, in 2013-14, when this intervention started, the average income was much lesser. Young people were not willing to stay in the village, and in 6-7 years, there was a significant shift. The water table has come up very much higher. So the agriculture output has increased. There's a lot of organic farming taking place. A lot of youth are now staying in the village. They are contributing to the farming, and all that happened on the foundation of, again, the energizing and calming intervention called Sudarshan Kriya, led by Art of Living Foundation. And this was the beginning. And, if we see that this whole intervention, we can sense that it is not only the yoga intervention. So as the healing requires empathy, it requires leadership support, it requires collaboration. In the same way, social transformation also requires not only yoga intervention, but also requires a sensitizing and inspiring changes. It requires local groups to be formed, identifying the right economic interventions. All that happened. But again, the power of the yoga-based intervention is that people remain connected. So until the Pranamaya Kosh also goes through the intervention, only conceptual, only economic logic, only social logic cannot keep people motivated. So the leadership development which happened in the youth leadership program, that supplied the leaders, the committed people, those young people. Many of them were suffering from many problems related to addiction or anger and many psychological and psychosomatic issues got addressed, and that built an unparalleled commitment. When person goes through the experience, that is the power of direct knowledge. When people experience, people have this direct knowledge, and the shift within themselves, that result into a very different level of commitment for the cause. And uh, the Pranamaya Kosh, the life energies, as well as the Vijnanamaya Kosh, the purpose in life, they, when they get aligned, Manomaya Kosh anyway become transformed. So this is like an interesting thing we see, that when the Pranamaya Kosh are aligned at the collective level, and when youth find the purpose, which is the fuel for Vijnanamaya Kosh, along with that, their Manomaya Kosh also gets aligned. And as a result of that, we saw the interventions at the society. Amazing stories. For example, the villagers contributed wholeheartedly with the lot of physical labor involved in making the watershed, the water tank and the watershed project, rain harvesting project. That was very, very successful, and that's why that actually connected those 10 villages, and that resulted into the increase in the water table rise, and then a lot of other economic benefits came with that. But those were not uh, only simple economic social benefit. There was a inner energy which is driving that. So this is one OD intervention, which is a social transformation, which was driven as much by interior inspiration as it was by the external network, external influencing, external conversations. So I think this is I thought, and I'm really thankful to Nagaraj ji and all the organizers who gave this opportunity to share, because we now need to look at, and that is what I would like to urge to the young scholars, please explore these aspects of yoga based interventions, which are at the organizational level, which are at the societal level, because that's where you will see the impact of these spiritual interventions at the policy level, at the systems level. Wish you all very best. Thanks for your involvement, and thanks for listening, and thanks to all for giving me the opportunity for sharing that.
Thank you very much, Ashish ji. This is really inspiring for all the youngsters interested in Hinduism-based modern psychological research. Ashish ji is always an inspiration for particularly how to implement the research. These two case studies are really amazing, and there is one question: how the input of niyamas was given, was a question by Rekha ji.
So input of the niyamas was given in the form of self-reflection. So instead of asking people follow Santosh or follow Swadhyay, you ask them what are your challenges, and the people write down their challenges. I end up taking fight with my wife, or uh, I have to get rid of my boozing habits, or all of us have challenges. Then we ask them, suppose I say, okay, what is your problem? And someone says, okay, anger is my problem. So we start, so in both these programs, the conversation is started with what Patanjali Yoga should say here, what is undesirable, what is suffering. And when they look at hey hetu, why there is anger? Anger because I get impulsive, I have some judgment, I have some evaluative mind, I have inability to control. Then comes the Han, which is like, what is your ideal? Would you like to be cool and calm? So what are the ways of achieving that? And then you look at what are the ways of achieving some calmness, what are the ways of controlling anger. And the first Hanupaya comes to our mind is observation. Because I need to find out in which situation I get angry. If I become aware of that pattern, naturally I will have more autonomy when I face that situation next time. And what is that self-observation? Self-observation is Swadhyay. Self-study, observing ourselves. Likewise, if you look at any challenge in the problem, any challenge in life related to development, that can be traced to some or other niyama, that the solution will come from some other niyama. In the programs, that indirect way and the self-reflection based methodology was adopted. That's why it could connect to the young people, because a rational mind, they don't want to start with what is best. They want to start with, I know the best. So we have to use their knowledge, their reflection to drive them towards. And these are like, ये तो शाश्वत सनातन नियम है, मतलब जीवन में, विश्व में कहीं भी किसी ने भी डेवलपमेंट किया होगा, उसने ये 5 नियमों का पालन किया ही होगा, उसने स्वाध्याय का पालन किया होगा, उसने संतोष का पालन किया होगा। ये तो सनातन है ही, लेकिन हम उसकी सेल्फ रिफ्लेक्शन से पार्टिसिपेंट्स को वहां तक दृष्टि अगर दे सकें, so that becomes their own discovery, and when they think that, okay, and now I see that, they tend to follow that.
There are other wonderful questions from Akash Sharma ji. There is a question that probably takes a very long time. So we will connect you, Akash Sharma ji, with Professor Ashish Pandey ji. He will answer this question. The question is how to implement this for school students. So that it will be a long answer. So let us take that up separately. Professor Ashish Pandey will guide you, Akash Sharma ji. Akash Sharma ji is running a startup. So he wants your help in executing this program for school students. Thank you very much, audience.
I'll say only one thing. Akash ji, we have implemented it in IIT, and recently I had a good fortune to get the invitation from IIM Ahmedabad to implement that in their course. So if it can be implemented in IIT and IIMs, it can certainly be implemented with much ease and lot of impact in the schools. So I would love to connect with you on this.
Thank you very much, Professor Pandey.